cybercrime laws are a composite of related legislation, many of which were referenced and recommended for updates and modernization. So, Mr. Minister, I'm urging that, as is noted in the report, that these legislation put forward for upgrade and amendments be placed squarely on the legislative agenda to strengthen our ability as a country to fight cybercrime going forward. I thank you.
Member from St. Andrews Southeastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to make two sets of comments. One, I want to start with process. The act that we are now seeking to amend is based on a joint select committee that was established in January 2021. Was established in January 2021. The joint select committee substantively had meetings in 2023 and completed its work in May 2023. We are at January 2026. Now, when the amendment to the 2015 Act was done, we had built in a review after a 3-year period. The point I'm making that in 2026, we are now due another review. And the reality is that the work that would have been done almost 3 years ago would not have taken account of probably the most important development in technology over the last century, which is the advent of artificial intelligence. I make this point to say that the lack of timeliness of moving from a joint select committee to a report to amendments affects this particular legislation more than others, because the nature of technology evolves so quickly. And so we have to ensure that, particularly for legislation of this nature, that we conduct the reviews and do the amendments in a timely fashion. There are two substantive points I want to make. First, the issue of reporting of cyber incidents. In the 2015 Act, we deliberately took the position that financial and other institutions there would be a voluntary obligation on their part to report. The experience and the evidence is that when you look at the number of reports in comparison to the anecdotal and the others that you know exist, the institutions are not reporting what is taking place. That has implications for policy. It has implications for a number of other things. And so a recommendation was made that we should move away from voluntary to an obligatory mandatory reporting to the regulator. And in this case, if it's a financial institution, it would either be the Bank of Jamaica or the Financial Services Commission. Now, obviously, financial institutions, no financial institution wants the publicity of acknowledging that there are breaches. But I'm sure if you speak to members here and in the general public, there are so many of us who have been victims of cyber criminal activity, particularly around banking transactions. And many of them are settled almost immediately. In a particular case for me, when I reported it, it was immediately settled. And I came to the conclusion that the bank acknowledged that it was a problem. I indicated I was not at that ATM at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was refunded my money. But the reality is that these reports are not being captured by the regulator, and it is important that is so. The second substantive area relates to Section 9, which is malicious communication, which is the most controversial clause in this act. In 2015, the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions published guidelines in relation to how the act should be, this particular clause should be interpreted, read. And I just want to encourage the government in the public education to ensure that those guidelines are made available. They're in the public domain, but to reinforce, because we are in an era where people believe that once you're online, you can say and do anything. And because it is difficult for the people who are offended to pursue the matters, people feel they have a license to almost act outside the law. So I want to encourage the dissemination and the inclusion of that report by the DPP's office surrounding Section 9 in all public education going forward on a continuous basis, so that the public is aware that the persons who are prosecuting, both law enforcement and prosecution, and the judges too, can be up to date with how that report dealt with Section 9. I was a member of the committee that did the review, and as my colleague from Southeast St. Mary said, we are broadly in support of the recommendations that are made. But the main point I would like to make is that with the passage of time, we are almost due now another review of this act to ensure that we incorporate the new advancements in technology, particularly around artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Member from Portland Eastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, I rise to support the amendments to the Cybercrimes Act. I just wish to just make a comment on Clause 8, which would be Section 15. And just to point to you what I genuinely believe may bring some fear or apprehension or fear of prosecution in relation to the lack of a definition in relation to the premises that is intended to be covered in this section. So it's not a criticism, it's just a wonder, and in light of what my friend from St. Andrew Southeast would have said, whether or not it's something that could be reviewed. Nothing I say here I think would prevent the passing of your legislation, but just wondering if it's something that we need to look at. In certainly the Dangerous Drug Act, the fraudulent transaction legislation, a lot of the activities are physical. This section, as worded, speaks to two types of knowledge. Actual knowledge, which is the knowingly cause, and then there is the turning a blind eye, kind of strict liability, being negligent. What is a little bit problematic is whether or not how we define who is the person in control of a premises, and whether we can control, as the section speaks about, any act under the Cybercrimes Act. You as a premises owner, a landlord, I can go to even the warder, to the minister of the state minister in security, even the warders in the prison institutions, and cell phone access, especially with the malicious communication, whether the premises and how liability comes about by a failure of defining the premises in relation to cyber crimes, because it's not general, or we can't make it comparative to the Dangerous Drug Act, where there's some physical substance that somebody can, or activities in and out of a premises. Youth club persons, community centers can find themselves in trouble with the law because the definition is not restricting or kind of giving guidance out of the legislation by the definition section. So I'm just raising it to say it may be something to consider or review. It won't prevent, I support it 100%, but there was a famous case, Sweet and Parsley, where Lord Reed would have said we're not in the business of turning ordinary citizens into criminals. And a section like this also give police wide powers to enter premises that has sometimes a owner, landlord, sublease, a lessee, or even family members who would not have known in a situation where TikTokers or teenagers decide to send malicious communication, or is in problem with multiple girlfriends and decide the TikTok drama that unfolds, and you find parents in trouble or pastors in churches, youth clubs, just something to consider. And thank you.
Member from St. Andrew Southwestern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to add my few words on the report of the Joint Select Committee to the Houses of Parliament on the Cybercrime Act. I want to say that there is really nothing controversial that I have to say, hopefully, today. That, as others have said, I agree with the direction of the amendments that are made. There is just one little provision that I am opposed to, and I'll tell you why. I listen to that. I know that the recommendations include repeal of Section 15 and provides for compensation of victims of cyber crimes and all of that. As I looked at it though, I